Hey everyone, and welcome. So today, we're going to talk about something that kind of flips the script on the usual startup advice. We're diving into a powerful alternative path, building a company not with some big investor's check, but with money from the people who matter most, your own customers. Let's get into it.
All right, let me ask you a question. What's the very first thing you think you need to start a business? You know, the one thing, the must-have ingredient that everybody says is the starting line for any new company.
For most people out there, especially in the tech scene, the answer is always cash, a big check. The whole game seems to be about getting validated by a VC, landing that seed round, and having that pile of money in the bank. That's just become the standard playbook, right?
But here's the thing. What if that whole playbook is, wrong? What if chasing that big check right out of the gate is actually a trap that leads you down a totally different and honestly a much harder road?
And that brings us to what I like to call the investor-first trap. It's this idea that when you prioritize fundraising before you prioritize finding customers, you can run into some serious trouble right from the very start.
The serial entrepreneur Bill Flagg, he just nails it when he says this. Having a huge pile of cash can actually make a startup lose focus. All of a sudden, you're trying to serve two masters, your brand new investors and your actual customers. And believe me, those two groups, they often want completely different things.
So let's break this down. You've really got two totally different worlds here. When you take VC money, your focus can start to drift. It becomes about making the investors look smart, which leads to spending a ton of money for growth at all costs, and maybe even a bloated culture. But on the customer path, your focus is crystal clear. Serve the customer. That forces you to have this super efficient, ROI-driven culture where every single dollar has to deliver real value.
Okay, so if that's the trap, what's the escape hatch? What's the alternative? Well, that's where the customer-funded path comes in.
It's such a simple idea, but it's also incredibly powerful. A customer-funded business uses the money from actual paying customers to grow. It creates this perfect feedback loop. You deliver value, they give you money, and you use that money to deliver even more value. There's no one in the middle. It's just you and your customer.
Okay, I know what you're thinking. Sounds good on paper, right? But does this actually work in the real world? Oh, you bet it does. Let's look at some real companies who pulled this off in a big way. So, let's kick things off with a great example, Naked Wines. But to really get why their model is so brilliant, you have to understand the huge problems that small winemakers face. First, making wine takes a long time, which ties up a crazy amount of money. And second, after all that work, there's zero guarantee that anybody's going to buy the stuff.
So what did Naked Wines do? They came up with this genius model that solved both problems at once. They had customers, they called them angels, which is pretty cool, pay £20 a month into an account. That cash went directly to the winemakers up front, wiping out their financial risk. And what did the angels get? They got killer discounts on amazing exclusive wines. Customers literally funded the inventory, making the whole business incredibly efficient.
So that's a great example from the consumer world, right? But don't think for a second this is just for things like wine. This model is super versatile. In fact, you could argue it works even better in B2B software.
Let's talk about a company called Reg Online. It was started by a developer just building a solution for one single client. But as they grew, they built this culture that was just laser-focused on discipline. The rule was simple. Every single dollar they spent had to pay for itself, no exceptions. If they hired a marketing intern, that intern's projects had to bring in enough new customers to cover their salary. Everything was tied directly to revenue.
And the results of that discipline? Absolutely incredible. Think about this. When they hit $10 million in revenue, they had a 40% profit margin. 40%! At the same time, their much bigger competitors, the ones with all the VC cash, they were still losing money hand over fist. This little customer-funded company was a lean, mean, profitable machine.
All right, these stories are awesome, right? But it begs the question, how do you actually do this? Well, it turns out there's some pretty clear rules you can follow, especially if you want to go the subscription route, which is one of the best ways to get customer funded.
When you look at the subscription businesses that really succeed, they almost always follow three simple rules. Rule number one, the product is perishable, meaning it gets used up, like news or food. 2, it's predictably consumed. The customer needs a new one on a regular schedule. Think razors or coffee. And 3, it's a genuinely good value. It has to save the customer time or money. Get these 3 right, and you're golden. Okay, so to really drive this home, let's look at a few companies that, well, didn't follow the rules. There was a company called Manpacks, a monthly box of essentials like underwear and socks. But really, does your underwear wear out every single month? For most people, definitely not. They broke that predictably consumed rule, right?
Or how about Shoe Dazzle, a new pair of shoes delivered to your door every month? I mean, it sounds great at first, but how many people really need a new pair of shoes every single month? Your closet would explode. The novelty wore off fast, and they just couldn't keep customers.
And one more, Tackle Grab, a subscription box for fishing lures. It's a cool idea for someone who loves to fish, but fishing lures don't really expire. You don't use them up. You might lose one here and there, but you don't need a new box every month. So again, it breaks that fundamental rule. The product has to get used up.
Okay, so we've talked about the trap, we've talked about the alternative path, we've seen proof that it works, and we've even got some rules to follow. This all leads to the big strategic choice that every single founder has to make at some point. Do you keep bootstrapping and growing organically, or do you take on investment to blitzscale, to just grow at an insane speed?
And I think the story of Deliveroo is the perfect way to look at this. I mean, this whole thing started with just one guy, the founder, literally walking around one neighborhood in London, putting menus on doors. It was bootstrapped, it was profitable. He proved the model worked before he took a single dollar. And only then did he decide to raise money. He didn't need the money to survive. He used it to hit the gas and go for total domination, expanding from one neighborhood to cities all over the world. And honestly, this is the most crucial point of this whole thing. Being customer-funded isn't about hating investors, not at all. It's about giving yourself options. It's about giving yourself power. You get to build a real, sustainable, profitable business first, and then you decide if, when, and on what terms you bring on partners. You get to walk into that meeting from a position of strength, not desperation.
So at the end of the day, it really boils down to this one question for you. What's your goal? Is it to build a great, stable, profitable business that you control, or is it to go for global domination? And the beautiful thing about the customer-funded path is that it lets you build that great business first and then decide if you want to go for global domination. It's all about having the choice, and that choice, that's real power.